All right. Well, we're starting off with a little bit of technical difficulty, so that's okay. Um, I am Alex Mailbranch. I am an engagement lead for the GitHub for Startups program. And typically, your host is Roselle, and she's in the midst of a move right now. So she might be having some technical difficulties, and she'll be hopping on shortly. But we've got an awesome startup here for you for Startup Wednesday. So we're really excited to bring on Gregory Johnson. Hey, Gregory. All right. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Hey, Alex. Hey,
Awesome,
world.
man. So Gregory, I'd love to just give you the floor for a couple minutes, kind of introduce yourself and your startup, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, sure. Happy to. So thanks for the opportunity. So my name is Gregory Johnson, and I'm the co-founder of a company called DataGovs, DataGovs.com. What we've built is a compliance API. So we know a lot of developers and teams as they build their products in various industries. Regulatory compliance is a big topic. Keeping track of standards and different specifications as you're building open source things, OpenAI things, public related code things is really tough. And what we've done is made it really easy for developers to integrate their into their apps, flag anything compliance related that may be an issue, and basically reduce and help reduce the amount of risk and time related to keeping track of various compliance rules. And we've been doing this since 2021, so really excited to talk about our journey. Prior to this company, I spent about 12 years working in the technology space as a developer and then working on product management. Two companies I worked for in the compliance space and healthcare were acquired. And then I spent some time at Microsoft working on corporate external legal affairs, helping companies, regulated markets leverage cloud such as Microsoft Azure, GitHub, and all these different tools in their workflows. So that's a little bit about my background and a little bit why I'm excited about what we're doing.
Cool. That's awesome, man. Appreciate you being on. So for those who are hopping on, and we had Roselle starting us off, having a little bit of technical difficulties, but we'll push right on. Excited to have Gregory here. I'm excited to have DataGovs here as well. Hey, Gregory, it looks like there might be somebody on with you. Do you have a co-founder or somebody on with you as well?
Yeah, so my co-founder, Goma, he's the CTO. He'll be kind of just in the background. If folks ask questions here, I'm sure he'll be diving into answering, but I'll be here. He's dealing with customers, so I'll be
All right.
there.
Cool, man. Well, let's start off with a little bit about you and your founder journey. I'd love to hear a little bit about that first. You said 12 years in tech, which is awesome. Some of the big tech companies like Microsoft. What kind of made you go from having that stable job, knowing what you were going to do and who you're working for, to the ups and downs of being your own founder?
Yeah, I mean, my story is a little bit, it's interesting. So like I started working for startups. Like my first job, like graduating high school, was with a VC company that invested in healthcare accelerators. And before I even stepped foot in college, one of the things I was doing was working with startup companies. So I had a kind of ground view of what it's like to build product, design, think about the technical details, as well as get a product out into market early on in my career. And I got to see the success of what that looks like when you kind of take a small team and you get a, you scale that to hundreds of employees and what that feels like. And then I worked in big tech. So to me, making the jump from big tech, from startup to big tech and then back into startup was really just interest and experience with all the uncertainties that come with it, as well as knowing the opportunities. As a startup, you get to move fast on certain things, but have strong distribution and you know how to build products yourself. It's a lot easier, I think, coming from it. It's still hard, still difficult, but for me, it's still exciting. And I was always organizing open source and open data development groups.
Okay.
So I was always showcasing and working with developer audiences around taking kind of like public data sets or open source code and building apps. And one of the things that made me kind of do this business was year after year, like we started in 2013, but year after year, the community just kept growing and folks just kept coming with different needs and things around like data and making sure their data quality was kind of like the integrity behind the data was good. So I think that's all kind of what kind of made me make the leap kind of 12 years in the game.
Very cool. And I was a former founder myself, and I know one of the toughest things when you're trying to make that transition is finding the right co-founder. So how did you and your co-founder come about and come together and decide DataGovs was going to be the thing you guys wanted to start together?
Yeah. So the co-founder I'm working with, we went to college together. He studied CS. We went to hackathons with each other year after year. We built a good relationship. As he sat and worked at big tech companies, and as I sat and worked at big tech companies, we just kept sharing like things we saw that was for us didn't make sense because these companies are so huge and they're still facing these data quality problems, and realize, okay, this is kind of big. And one things we noticed is for really legacy markets, like really boring industries, like we service companies that are like in packaging, trying to make sure that they can get into new markets like cannabis packaging, electric vehicles. There's a lot of new data specifications and machine generated data, and a lot more need around keeping in compliance. But a lot of folks didn't just have the resources to do that because a lot of the apps were really legacy. They didn't integrate with the right things. The UI was kind of like really old. And we got into this really because customers reached out to us. Like we got customers before we even built a product. And I think that's what made us kind of gravitate towards like building a product and building a company around it.
Man, that is a dream, to get customers before you're even building a product. So that is awesome. All right, Greg, so I'm going to turn it over to you completely. Let's show everybody a little bit about what DataGovs is all about. As I'm bringing your screen up here, shout out to everyone that's joining us. We've got some people from Paris, from Germany, the UK, Nigeria, Oklahoma City, from all over the world. So appreciate you guys being with us, and excited for Gregory to show us a little bit about what DataGovs does. So Gregory, over to you.
Yeah, happy to talk about it. So yeah, again, what we have is a compliance API. What we've built is a regulatory database and a regulatory data engine that companies and teams can basically plug into, giving read-only access to their database or their app. And what we do is basically help them check and transform data and flag risk of compliance based on their state or territory. So what does that look like? I'm going to go through a quick example with one of our customers. I'm going to go high level since this is with one of the customers who's given us permission to kind of demonstrate this. So I'm going to talk about our compliance monitoring API. And the quick way that we work with organizations is we can basically plug into most databases, but most organizations use one of the top 3 clouds, which is Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, Amazon Web Services. Most of our clients, once they connect their cloud and they have this kind of database or database going, one of the key things is if they're sharing this data with external parties, they want to make sure it's meeting compliance, especially if they're dealing with governments. One company that does electric vehicles called Boaz Bikes leverages DataGovs and has used this to scale in 5 states by keeping track and using us to make sure that their data adheres to the mobility data specification. So how that works is that company has their own environment where they can log in, boaz.govs, and let me see if I can change my screen so you can see what I'm talking about. So yeah, they have their own environment where they can set up and basically give authentication or give access to authentication tokens to different groups that want to access their API through us. What happens then is once they log into the app, let me see if I can come in. It's opening up a second tab. Let me see if I can bring it up here. Great, so I'm just gonna use kind of the standard key. Okay, let's see if it gives me authorization here. It's giving me something wrong. Let me just jump into the demo we have here set up.
That's okay. The demo gods always have to provide some sort of resistance.
Some sort of resistance every time. So what we basically do is once you get your authentication token ready through us, this organization can use whatever kind of API testing tool or monitoring tool they choose. And then they can basically run a GET request and get it as an endpoint. Let me see if it populates here. Okay, it's not populating. Let me update the authentication token. Give me 1 minute to get that up.
While you're doing that, just to kind of get anybody that didn't hear us at the very beginning. So your initial host, usually Roselle, she's in the midst of a move right now. So we had her drop off. We've got some backups here to help out. Live. We're live, so things like this happen as the same with demo gods as well. So my name is Alex, and I help run the startup program for engagements. And then we've also got somebody on our DevRel team, Kadesha, who's going to be doing some hosting as well for today in the place of Rizal. So we appreciate you guys kind of sticking with us and working through some of these bumps today. Greg, how are we looking on the demo?
Yeah, so it's pulling up data. So I'm actually going to go to the API we have to serve a packaging company. So the company basically connects to us, and I'm going to scroll down here if you could still see my screen. And basically what we serve to that company is our API, but we give them regulatory kind of like monitoring of compliance rules for cannabis. In the state of US, Canada, South Africa, and other places, they have really strict rules about cannabis packaging and marketing. So when an organization, in this case, is operating an e-commerce website and somebody wants to buy a piece of packaging from them, they use DataGovs to basically check and make sure that the packaging adheres to that kind of like standard and specification before they send it to them, which could be a violation of compliance. And we keep track of all those rules. So in this case, you're able to see when the data itself is showing packaging rules within a specific state in the US. You're also able to see age restrictions, possession limits, what's allowed within a state. This is Arkansas, for example. And they use this data feed and they integrate it into our app. For the demo that for some reason isn't working, we have another use case where manufacturing of electric vehicles basically tracks their vehicle endpoints, and they use us to basically transform that data so it meets the compliance standard of whatever state or country that they're working in. So this is typically how companies have been using DataGovs.
Okay, cool. So maybe this is a dumb question, so I apologize in advance. But the compliance requirements that you guys take a look at, is it just within the United States, or is it as well like global, like GDPR and other like European standards and everything like that?
Yeah, so it's not just in the US. These are just US examples. It's global. Any country that you're working with that has a specific data standard or specification, we can check against. For most of our companies that we've worked with our customers, it's typically developers that are dealing with hundreds, if not thousands of different specifications, depending on the product or service that they're operating. And they want to basically have a tool that checks for that without having to kind of go to multiple departments or involving multiple departments kind of like towards the end of the cycle.
Okay, got it. Cool. So as I was saying a little bit before, Rizal, who's our usual host, she was having some technical difficulties, but she's back in business. So I'll bring her back on. We appreciate having you back. Oh, now we can't hear you.
No, you can hear me now. I'm so sorry, everyone. I'm in a different place that doesn't have the greatest internet, and I thought it was good, but as soon as the stream started, it just popped me right out. So I decided to join my phone.
No worries.
Thank you so much, Alex, for leading the like stream so far. I was looking at the demo a little bit. Thank you for that.
Sure thing. I will pass it back over to you with just a leading question here. We had a question during that demo, Greg, and maybe you can answer that. It said, which provider is better, provides the best service and secure sharing communication?
Which provider provides the best service and what?
Secure sharing communication.
Secure sharing communication. So that's kind of broad, but I guess if you're asking which provider, is this a cloud provider they're mentioning, or?
Yeah, they're mentioning a cloud provider, correct?
Yeah. Okay. So because we partnered with all of them, all of them are pretty good. We love using Microsoft, but I have a Microsoft Azure background. But AWS, Google Cloud, it's really just based on, I guess, the experiences of your team. Our team had a lot of AWS experience, but I've used all three clouds. In the case of, since we're based in the US and a lot of our customers are kind of like US-based companies, we've used Microsoft Azure, but we've helped companies on all three clouds. I can't say anyone are better than the other. I can just say that they have different interfaces. So make sure that whoever you're working with understands that cloud tool very well. And it can get really expensive if you're not like using credits. So make sure you're kind of like really conscious of like those kind of cost restraints as you kind of grow your applications.
Yeah, that's a really great answer. I agree with that. I always think in terms of technologies, you can never say that like one is better than the other, right? It's just like what would work for you, cost-wise, efficiency-wise, and all that depending on like your situation and use case. All right, so I know that like I missed a ton. I think you just did the demo. Did you get to introduce yourself, Gregory?
Yes, I got to introduce myself. The only thing that you missed is we're trying to get up a demo for one of the API feeds that we do for one of our customers. So now it's up so folks can kind of see it. So we like using this use case because electric vehicles are pretty ubiquitous. A lot of folks know there's a scooter or bike up the road that's tied to like some type of electronic device. What they don't know though is that all of these different devices have a specific specification that they need to adhere to for the state, local, as well as different operational needs to make sure their data is one, in private, and two, meeting compliance. So through our feed, we're able to serve that. But yeah, we went through kind of introductions, and just as the second piece of the demo that I can dive into if people have questions.
Yeah, if you wanted to, you can. Or if you were like, let's save it for later. But if you wanted to reshare, you can. I am on my phone, so if we did reshare, if Kadesha or Alex could help with that.
Yeah, no problem.
As well. I love to always like acknowledge the audience. I don't know if we got a chance to, but there people are calling in from different areas of the world. So I did do see someone calling in from or like tuning in from Morocco and the UK, and Turkey, and all these other places, Nigeria, Florida, and Ukraine. So I just wanted to highlight some of those comments. Again, because I'm on my phone, I'm having a hard time actually showing it, but I do want to say thank you for tuning in from all over the world. All right, so go ahead and show us this demo.
Oh, okay, sure. So I just showed the demo. So if folks didn't see, the demo is working and running. So let me run it back. You see my screen? You should be able to.
Yep, I can see your screen. I see like requests. So since I missed out on a lot, and maybe some other people are tuning in a little bit afterwards, what exactly are you showing here?
Yeah, sure. So we have a compliance API. What we've done is we've put together a regulatory database, and we help developers and people building apps for various industries make sure their data, once connected to DataGovs, can read and is transformed in a state that makes it compliant. So as they're sharing their data to third parties, we can flag issues in data compliance or data quality for them. So one of the things that we're getting up is basically getting an authentication token through our setup for our customer Boaz Bikes. Now you can see it here. What I've done is took the, basically I've shown you what the endpoint looks like for that organization as we showcase it to various cities or states that work with them. What people can see right now is they can see in kind of JSON format the version of the API that's being used, the last time we update this, which is usually in real time for each of these vehicles. So what people are looking at right now is a feed of about 5 states that are tracking electric vehicles, and how we're making sure that every time for each piece of the data and the specification, whether it's provider ID, provider name, device ID, vehicle type, all of this data is coming in a compliant way. And we have parties all over the country using this right now to basically verify and track that this organization is in compliance. This is one of the examples we use to just showcase how DataGovs work. We can tie into any database. The second example that I showcased to the group here was how we're helping packaging companies track compliance of packaging and labeling. So through DataGovs endpoint, developers are able to integrate with us and be able to get a real-time feed of compliance rules. All of these are US adjacent, but we've worked with companies outside of the US as well for compliance.
Awesome. Okay, I'm gonna be the dumb one here and ask a really dumb question. What do you mean by compliance? Like you said, compliance a lot of times. Maybe there's other people who are not really within that industry. And I did see someone say, "Oh, it's a lot of information for them." So when you say like you want to make sure it's compliant, you're saying like for certain but like you gave for like the traffic laws, right? You're saying they have certain like standards, right? And you're analyzing, monitoring that data and making sure it meets those standards. Just like break it down for like a 5-year-old.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. So in any business or any organization on the planet has to make sure that they're operating in regulatory compliance. In the world of building products, especially software products, there are compliance rules around privacy if you're in Europe, such as GDPR. But in industries specifically, let's say you're making electric vehicles, or let's say you're in cannabis, or let's say you're in packaging, each one of these industries have standards and specifications that are typically run through manual processes. So some organizations have spreadsheets, others use email. There's a lot of different things, but they don't have like version control around these standards and specifications. So what we've done is for organizations, let's say that are running a packaging organization and they do e-commerce orders online and they do it globally. Every time they send a package to another organization, they want to make sure that package is in compliance, right? So they typically have one or multiple apps that they're running to make sure those processes go through. And what they typically want is for the data to be correct, reliable, and trustworthy. And that usually takes a lot of manual work. What we've done for some of these organizations is leverage automation so they can track that at the API level. And to break that down to like a 4-year-old, we have a regulatory database that uses automation and AI to scan compliance rules. And every time an organization plugs in an app or rule or standard that they have to adhere to for their business digitally, we can verify that it meets that standard, or we can flag things they need to change to make sure that they're meeting that standard.
I love that. That was actually a really great explanation that made a lot of sense to me as someone that's, I don't think I'm really in the business world of like how do businesses do things. Okay, so my question to you, right, is now I'm kind of curious. We usually start with your story first and then go into the demo, but we started the opposite way. I'm kind of curious what made you passionate or interested in even starting this company, because I think maybe it just might be like my developer hat on. I'm usually more into like, oh, I want to start like a developer tool, and this is more of a tool for it's a developer tool at the same time, but it's more of a tool for businesses. What inspired you to create this?
Yeah. So what inspired me to create this is we used to run an open data group in Florida, and we used to run this for like 7-8 years. And what we used to do is we used to take GitHub and show people a bunch of different open source repositories and link them up to public data that governments have on their website. And they'd show us these data portals and we'd create apps. You'd be like, hey guys, we know that, police brutality is a big thing. Did you know you can go to this data set online and find police misconduct records? And they'd be like, no, we don't know that. And be like, okay, here, we're going to walk through step-by-step how to build an app around that. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. I didn't even know we could use that data for our app. We thought that was like sensitive information. And every time we not only bring like developers, we bring organizations, and they'd always be interested in the work that we're doing. And one thing we realized is that every country has like a public data portal, but very few times people know how to navigate leveraging these data portals to not only make apps, but solve real business problems. And in most cases, we saw new markets coming up like crypto, electric vehicles, and even old industries like packaging that had a lot of manual paper-based processes for tracking compliance. And we as developers and folks that were engineers by trade that worked for big tech companies kept seeing these big problems that weren't solved. So we said, okay, let's help organizations solve this problem with data quality. And let's start with compliance, since compliance is something everybody understands. People know if they're outside of compliance, they're going to get fees, they're going to have to shut down their company, or there's going to be a whole bunch of legal drama. So that's how we kind of got into it. And I've been working with communities today. We still use GitHub in a lot of ways, but we still kind of run the same kind of like playbook. We show folks, hey, this is open government data. This is how you can apply it to your process, and this is how you can build an app around it. And the question we'd always get is, okay, this is great. How do I get more visibility and control governance over my data itself? And that's what kind of made us build this company. I was telling Alex earlier that we got customers before we even built a product. And that's because we led a lot of community and developer related groups. And compliance was always a thing that developers and engineers didn't want to spend too much time on. And they would prefer to have an API that made it easy for them to just bring it into their app rather than do it themselves.
Awesome. I really, really love that story of like you were going into communities, you were showing people like just about the start of how it all happened for you. You were showing communities like how it worked, how the police brutality data, and then you ended up building your customers through that. I also apologize that my audio is pretty low, and yeah, so let me know if you can't hear me. I'm like screaming at the top of my lungs, but I don't know. Okay, so my next question to you is like, what was your strategy around, like, because this is Started Up Wednesday, like what was your strategy around turning this from like a community like project to like bringing it into like a full-fledged business? Did you decide, okay, I'm gonna go get some VC money first? Did you bootstrap? Did you just say, okay, maybe it starts off as open source and then we go open core? Just curious on that end.
Yeah, so because we got customers early and data management is a huge field, we're just very fortunate enough to build a revenue generating company out the gate. Compliance, again, is a big need. A lot of engineers and developers don't want to have to build their kind of own compliance engines or their own compliance databases. They prefer to use a third party to do that, especially from some legacy industries. So we got customers early. And that was a great question. So open core, I mean, for me, as somebody that's been a part of the open source community for a long time and open data, I always hated when companies came out of nowhere and were like, we're going to give this thing to you, get 30,000 people to, follow this or track this and build this framework. And then after that, charge a fee for it later. So while we support open source and public code, we kind of use it as something that's complementary. So we go into communities and say, hey, we know you guys love this new large language model, but how do you have visibility and control to make sure that the data sources you're pulling from are in compliance? And then we show them the API. So we kind of use it as complementary. And since open source licensing have a bunch of complexities in there, since you're using a bunch of different things, people typically kind of understand, oh yeah, if I'm using a bunch of different projects that have been going on for years, I probably want to know if this license lets me use this for my organization. And I think these are questions that usually happen after. It's like, oh, we've already implemented the project. And then legal team is like, did you build the code? Did you write the code yourself? And it's like, no, we use this project. And then you're like, did you make sure it meets all these different things? So for us, to answer your questions in a long way, we definitely continue using open data and open source communities as examples of why compliance monitoring is important. For open source, license compliance, and for public data, general compliance.
That's totally fair. That makes a lot of sense, especially when you're dealing with so many rules and legalities. I'm always just curious, just because maybe one day I'll be a founder. I'm always curious. I'm like, how did you go about your path? How did you make that decision? All right, it looks like we have a question from the audience around your demo that you showed. And they said, how is performance data analysis, let me see. How is performance data analysis packaging an API if number of data? Okay, I guess they're asking how does the performance work with the API if the data is increasing on demand? I hope this question makes sense to you.
Yeah, and we like to break it down into use cases. So performance data analysis for packaging and API. So we ran into this use case that we didn't even think about, but packaging companies would come to us and they'd be like, hey, Greg, we see you do regulatory compliance monitoring. We have this API. We as a packaging company have all these rules that we have to follow in terms of data standards and data specifications for our product and packaging. It's called specification data. We get really granular. We have to know everything related to the product. And today we're running it through spreadsheets, and every team has their own spreadsheet. And we have an ERP system, enterprise resource planning system, where they're legacy oriented and they don't really integrate or play well with our new tools. So how we've helped in terms of performance analysis is helping these packaging companies have one unified API that basically speaks the same language of their team internally, checking to make sure that in the state or specifically country, if the packaging and labeling meets a certain requirement. So for example, in the US, cannabis is a new thing that's rolling out in places like NYC. There are really funky rules. Like in NYC, you can't make things look like it's appealing to a child. So it can't be too colorful. It can't use verbiage that may seem like it's a candy. So being able to flag that immediately before somebody makes a 10,000 pouch or package order and gets it delivered to their company is really important. So these are the type of parameters we're dealing with when companies make requests. It's like saying, hey, before we make this order, can you verify and check if this is actually meeting a standard? And using us, which is an API that can pull in and integrate with their different data sources to check against that, to make sure the data integrity is in place, but more importantly, that the data itself meets the compliance standard that's in place for that state or jurisdiction.
That was actually such a good example that you just made. That actually made everything click for me, where you said okay, this is maybe you're helping a cannabis company and you want to make sure that the packaging meets those standards at that time, including making sure it doesn't look attractive for a child because they would be underage to use that. That was a really great example. Thank you so much. All right, so I'm actually, I know this is going to be the only AI question that I ask you, but I'm actually curious, how do you incorporate AI into this? I'm already kind of assuming specific ways based on what you described, but how do you include AI into your product? And I know a lot of companies are jumping on the AI train now and figuring out how can they bring in either generative AI or machine learning into their product. And I'm curious, what role it plays in yours?
Yeah, happy to talk about that. So the quick answer from engineering stance is people often don't think about it, but artificial intelligence, for large language models, LLMs, which everybody loves today because of ChatGPT, it's all text, right? And when you think about compliance and specification, it's text data. So helping companies basically leverage these models to scan text and make sure they're getting high accuracy and reliability to the output of that text. So what does that mean? So you set up, in preparation for this talk, we actually set up an environment. We used an open source tool we found on GitHub, and we set it up, and we're like, okay, let's say we're talking about DataGovs GPT. What this tool does is actually pulls from Census 2021 data. And with this Census 2021 data, you can check it up on, online. There's like San Francisco GPT. There's a whole data source around what they call text to SQL generation, which is using prompts to basically ask questions of your kind of like data set or database and getting it answered in simple text. So let's say I want to know, since I'm in Baltimore, or let's say Florida, the 5 cities in Florida with the highest crime. What it's going to do is it's going to basically query the data. It's going to show you what the SQL, what the SQL query would look like. It's going to give you an answer here of like, oh, these are the top 5 cities with the highest crime in the state of Florida. Then it's going to give you a generated map. So all of this was thanks to kind of like that natural language prompt, right? But here's where it gets interesting. If I didn't tell you that this is Census 2021 data, how would you know what the source is of this data outside of going to an external party? Where we see a lot of organizations struggling with now is they want to bring these LLMs into their workflows. And one of the key things about this is going to be the quality of the data, as well as making sure that anything that you put into production is meeting compliance. Meaning if this data touches privacy and you want to do kind of like a SQL generation model where you're asking a question to your database and it's answering it, the right people have access to it. And because this is machine generated data in many cases, it even makes it even more important to make sure that you're checking for compliance. So tools like our API can help flag risks and issues before it becomes into production. And that's kind of where we see the future going. We think a lot of it's going to be really cool. And you can take a large body of text and make it really interesting for organizations to understand and get summaries of what they need to adhere to from compliance, great. But also making sure that as you use these tools, whether you're using an open source solution like this, you're making sure the license meets compliance, as well as how you're using the data, whether it's internal or external, is meeting all the obligations that you have as a business.
I think that was a really good call out on making sure that I think it's just about responsible AI, right? Like making sure that the way that the data is being used is like in a good private way that meets what you said is compliance. And then like just overall, I think that was a good usage of AI, because I do see some company, I'm very excited about LLMs and AI, if you know anything about me. But I do see some companies just kind of like trying to fit it in, where I'm like, it kind of doesn't necessarily like go in very well. Yeah. Let's see. There is a question that was highlighted. I don't know if it's necessarily relevant, but basically they're asking, do you have any opinions on between ChatGPT and Falcon, which modal has a less hallucination rate? I don't even know the answer.
Yeah, I don't really have an opinion on that because I don't know much about Falcon. What I would say is OpenAI has an API and people love it and people are integrating into their products. There's a bunch of different kind of LLMs that are coming out here. But as you implement this, one of the key things we see in data quality as well as compliance is making sure as you integrate these tools into your operation that you have absolute visibility and control of what's actually being sent and showcased to your end user. And that's when things like compliance falls into big kind of questions. And to touch on like your earlier statement around kind of like this whole AI wave around kind of like text data and LLMs. So one of the things I think about is, this technology isn't necessarily new, but the accessibility rate of like how people can imagine using this has become a lot easier thanks to ChatGPT. We as an organization think about like, okay, what happens when there's multiple vendor options for you to basically do the same thing ChatGPT is doing, which is available now. There's Dolly, there's, Hugging Face. What happens when there's multiple kind of solutions to do it? How do you do it in an agnostic way where you're not tying your solution, or you're not tying your AI down to one solution? That's another thing we think compliance and tools like ours are going to help with. It's going to be being able to benchmark, being able to swap out and being able to go from testing to production with how you're integrating it into your product.
Awesome. Thank you for, I think the way you answered that was great. I don't know much about Falcon either. Okay, let's actually pivot just straight into more of your founder story. I'm curious, is this the first startup that you've ever created? And if not, like, have you always just imagined yourself as a startup founder, or do you think you just fell into it from what you described earlier, where you started off with this being more of a community like driven or community driven product or project, and then it turns into a startup for you? Have you ever like pursued the whole like business startup game?
Yeah, so my first, my first gig in the world of kind of startups was at the earlier stage of my career. And I got to see very early on how companies, it was a healthcare IT company in compliance. I got to see very early on how you can build a $10, $50 million company and scale up in less than 3 years. And then I got to work for another one that did something similar, except in pharmaceuticals. So I think for anybody that thinks about building a company, you really have to just be passionate about it. For me, I was passionate about data. I loved it. But like leaving, especially if you're really good at getting into high growth tech companies or big tech, it's not an easier path, but it's definitely a less risky path, kind of working for big established companies. But for me, I just always had this kind of awareness and exploration around like community and open data. And we had, again, customers were coming to us saying, "Hey, Greg, how can we work with you, like to pay you to do this?" And that's what kind of led me to like saying, okay, let me do this and let me formalize this as a business. Also community. I came up in Miami, so I got to see and have a proximity around culture where there was a lot of people building software as a service companies. And I think that really also helps when you see other people making money and leaving big companies to start things. It makes it a little bit more real and a little bit more like in proximity to what you're doing. So all of those things helped me. And it also helped me see the different paths. Like as a startup and as a business that's generating revenue, you have a couple paths, right? You can continue doing what you're doing and be in control of your business and continue growing bigger. You can get venture capital, which we haven't done if you want to build like a company that gets to 100 million in revenue. But typically what happens with companies like this is a bigger company that's more established, once they see you doing work, what they do is they acquire you, and then you get back into a kind of like a big company scenario where you're working as an employee, maybe in a better role. So I think like there's always going to be an opportunity for people that innovate and know how to build a product from the ground up, whether it be writing code, designing apps, selling software, or building data analysis. And for me, it was just something that made sense based on all the work that I was doing already.
I love that, especially what you said around just seeing the realness of it, right? I think a lot of times we might not understand or know the possibilities of where our careers go. Like we may just know like what our environment tells us, maybe our family or friends or TV. But once you start growing up around or learning from different people and surrounding yourself with different people, you're like, oh shoot, you can start a business. You can do it this way. You can do it that way. So I really love that you brought that up as a point. Okay, there is a question in the audience. I can't highlight it right now, but feel free to if anyone's backstage. Thank you so much. From Mikkel, I hope I'm saying it right, or Michael, they're saying, what sets your implementation of data governance apart from standards already in use?
Yeah, great question. We love it. So there is traditional data governance companies that exist today, but the biggest acquisitions that are happening today in the market as we see it is of AI first data governance tools. And what does that mean? So traditional data governance tools look at enterprise data systems based on kind of like this walled garden mentality. And what does walled garden mentality mean? It means all the data that you have is inside within your control. What we're seeing with machine generated data like AI and language learning models and generative AI is there's now this budding new wave of new data being generated at higher volumes that really need quality. And standard access control can't really keep up with this. So when I define governance, I think about visibility and control. Those are the two triggers that we think about, visibility and control. And just think about like all the new AI tools that drop every day. Like how much visibility do you have to this? We meet a lot of developers that implement a lot of these different frameworks and language learning, large language models, and they're just like, I feel like I have less control because I'm just using this framework. So we separate ourselves kind of in helping companies that want to use this technology and what we define as boring industries. So we're targeting small businesses, small to mid-sized enterprises, companies that don't have core kind of like their core business isn't data, isn't software. It's in being a great packaging company, a good consumer business, a good EV company. And I think that's how we're separating ourselves, at least when we bring our solution to them, in terms of what we offer to them, in terms of price point, in terms of value, it makes sense. Data is huge. Data governance is huge. Cloud data warehousing is huge. Hundreds of millions of dollars pour into the cloud. And as a business owner, one of the things that I'm happy to see is the bigger the market, the more niches there are. And I think for us, we found a great niche in the data governance space that when we service our customers, they say they haven't seen a solution that kind of appeals to them in that same way. So hopefully that answers your question. But yeah, differentiation is really important as you build any product or business.
That was a great question, and that was a great answer. I do think that right now we see that trend of AI, and it is about differentiation. All right, there's another question, but before I pull it up, I want to make sure it's even relevant to your business. Do you all do anything with pre-processing data? And I don't know if you can see the comments on the right-hand side for you, Gregory, just before I pull it up. I don't want to put you on the spot.
Yeah, so do we do anything with pre-processed data? To answer your question, yes. We have had some cases where the data is already pre-processed, where there's already kind of some structure to the data. In most cases, we're dealing with real-time data feeds. So I showcased the electric vehicles because those are sending data every minute that needs to be in compliance. I showcased cannabis, which is a different use case because that's data that's kind of updated monthly or quarterly. So yes, we do and leverage pre-processed data. Where we find kind of like the need around companies is making sure that in certain areas of the data, like let's say it's time series data, making sure they have a clear accountability of making sure that's up to date, because those are really kind of the key points. But every organization is different. But to answer your question, yes.
Okay, cool. Because there was a question regarding, I guess they wanted advice around like, how do you pre-process data? And do you all use Pandas for this at all? That's why I asked.
Yeah, okay, I see. So there's a lot of different libraries. The hard part about working in the data space is there's a lot of different tools out there. So I've heard of Pandas, but we're not using Pandas.
Okay, cool. That's totally fair. Okay, so my other question to you, right? We talked about like, I think right, being a startup founder, you kind of talked about a little bit about the cons where you said it might be safer to work in big tech. I do want to know about what challenges you faced as a startup founder. I like to always be realistic with people when I'm talking to them. Like, even if I tell people, oh, go be an open source maintainer or go be like a developer or whatever, I still want them to know like what are the downfalls that you might expect so they'd be best prepared. So I'm curious, what have been some challenges you faced at any stage in your career as a startup founder?
I think it's just building a business is really hard. You have to be really customer obsessed. You have to be comfortable with selling, and you have to be really comfortable with the idea that you're making a risk. And I think for me, what made me say now is the fact that, as I see my life, I always think about like, okay, what do I want to, I have a certain amount of time on this earth. When I'm at the ending phase of my life, do I want to say that, I just worked for this big tech company and did this, really important work for the rest of my days? Or do I want to say that, I took a chance and used a moment in time where software companies are coming up. They're not only building a lot of value, but they're solving a lot of problems. So as any founder, any person building a company, you have to just realize that, there is risk. And the definition of what's going on, I think, in the masses and like in the public isn't necessarily like the truth. Like if you go on media, there's always going to be a company raising money. There's always going to be a company that is growing really quickly. But the reality is most businesses take a little longer to get there. And the company that's raising money has an expectation to get to $100 million in annual revenue. And the company that makes the 10 million or 20 million or 30 million, while for you and your team of small people, that may be great, right? Because you can pay yourself as much as you want. That's not what the VCs expect. So I think as a business owner, we need to start rethinking how we define success as startup companies. Because I know a lot of good people that can build companies, they get to 10, 20, 30 million in revenue. And they're like, well, VCs won't invest in this. So, but the VCs, like they have a certain, expectation. So be prepared for that. And if you're a person of color, if you're a minority, if you're a woman, if you're in a place where there isn't a lot of startup activities coming, you're going to face an uphill battle to raise capital regardless. And that doesn't matter about your traction. That doesn't matter how big your market is. You could have everything perfect. And, in the market, somebody may say, oh, as a decision maker to this fund, you don't meet these patterns. You don't come from X school. You don't have X big tech experience. And these are things that happen every day. What I say to business people or people starting a business or company, focus on building your business and do it in the way that you choose to. And for better or worse, if you're able to build a company, there's always going to be an opportunity where you can create jobs. You can always find a job as well. So I tell people, think about it in that way. And that's some of the things that I can advise folks on the startup kind of founder journey. It is hard, it is long, but the hard part is it always tied to when people tell stories, it's always it's so hard to fundraise, or it's so hard to make money. The hard part is really when you're making a lot of money, when you're getting a lot of customers, when you're getting that fundraising, because that means you now have a lot more accountabilities, and people don't think about it in those terms.
Okay, I love everything you said. Because, okay, we have had someone else come on and talk about that similar thing you said, where you don't want to compare yourself to these big name stories about oh, this person's making $10,000 million, whatever. You know what I mean? So I love that. But I didn't even think about the fact that the hard part is when you're actually making money and having customers, because now you actually have to really put in the work and actually deliver, right? You can have on your marketing website that you do this, this, and this, but you want to make sure that you give your customer quality. So I appreciate that you brought that up. Okay, so you kind of brought up a little bit about as a minority, everyone's going to experience bias. That just happens. Minorities know that. I'm curious on, do you have any thoughts on how we can increase the number of diverse founders, especially technical founders? Maybe you're not really the technical founder out of the two of you and your CTO, but you seem pretty technical from talking to you, and even before me knowing you, I know you're pretty technical. So do you have any thoughts on how we can increase diversity and inclusion and belonging within this ecosystem?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. I think it's just going to be stemming from how we serve the idea of tech and software entrepreneurship to groups like us, where the model of, okay, build it, have this idea, go raise from your friends and family $500,000, then go to some VCs and raise more money. That's not going to happen. And in our space, as a data space, most companies out the gate raise $10, $12 million before even having a product. And that's just based off networks. So I think it's about rethinking how you want to establish your business and why you're establishing that business, and setting expectations. I know a lot of people, because of the market and because of the bias in the industry, they're like, I could build $1 billion company, but really what you should focus on is, okay, how can I make $100,000 company? Then how can I get to $1 million company? Then how can I get to a $10 million company? And then maybe if we're building this company and it's doing well and we need some more capital to get this going, but how can I make cash day one? And you just have to really be made for it. Some people aren't they don't want to do that, right? And it's very hard. I tell people me and my co-founder, it's very easy for us to go and be all right, I'm gonna sign up for this big tech company and get this job. We didn't come into this because we wanted to create jobs for ourselves. We already had that. We came into it because we had a problem that we're really passionate about and something that we saw as a business opportunity. So I think to increase the number of people here, it's going to be just about kind of redefining what successful startups look like. Genius and brilliance in technology and software as a service for a long time has had one narrative, and that narrative has sat in the minds of so many different people that engineers, designers, top technical talent, big tech companies kind of limit themselves in being I could never start I had that conversation when I was at Microsoft. I'm at Microsoft, I could never build the next this and this and that. But then I realized okay, maybe I don't have to build that. Maybe I can be comfy making millions of dollars, serving customers, serving an industry that's in a really good place, and be happy knowing we can hire great employees, we can get happy customers, and we continue servicing them. And that's not necessarily bad. It's not a loser mindset to think maybe making $50 million in a year and having a small, tight company where you serve people is bad. So I think it's about changing that. And I think that's how you do it. I come from the innovator perspective. So it's very hard for an engineer to give up a $300K, $400K salary to go start a business. But ultimately, people get to a point where they want to do it themselves. They're hungry because they want to build a new tool. They're frustrated because they try to work on a project and they did all this amazing work, but now they're not getting like recognition for this work. All of these things always happen. And for me as a founder, I've always heard these stories from other people. So I think when you're building a business, don't build it from just a point of like, I want to start a business because I want to be my own boss. Build it because you're really passionate about something, because you got to put in 5-7 years at least to see success. And some people aren't in that position to do that, or don't want to be in that position, which isn't bad.
I think that is so true on what you said. You said a lot, so like my brain's just like processing all of it. But yeah, I think that is true on changing the overall narrative. Us people getting a better understanding of what it is like to be a startup founder, and making what you described almost sounded more like SMART goals, like being like, hey, I want to make this amount, I want to make this amount, like gradually going up to that amount, rather than being like, I'm trying to make $1 million off the top. And I think I hope it's inspiring for other people who are listening, because I do think it's inspiring to hear that at first you were at Microsoft saying, oh my gosh, I could never be that person. But now look at you. You literally are leading a company that is servicing many other organizations and bringing AI and automation into that. Okay. My last question around your founder story, since we're getting down to like some of the last minutes, is, I mean, I have more questions, but this is the last founder story question, is like, just what's been like the most rewarding part for you? We talked a lot about like the challenges, but are there any singular moments or general moments where you're like, yes, this is what I should be doing? I know you said you're passionate, but passion only runs so long. So what is the thing that you were like, yes, like I know I should be here, and this helps me to continue doing it?
I think happy customers using the tool that you're using to build their businesses, that's really important, because we get to service companies when they're at that pivotal moment, small business enterprise of growing, that don't have all the resources. They can't go and cut a necessarily multi-million-dollar check to this big company to run their software, because they're only making a couple $1,000,000 in revenue a year, or they're only making XYZ. So I think some of the proudest moments is being able to serve them, see them scale and grow, see them happy, generating revenue, getting profits, and being able to pay myself and staff, more so staff. There's so many talented people. And what I found working in big tech is not everybody gets that shot to be recognized. Not everybody is given that space to execute. So being able to convince those people to kind of want to work with you on something is really amazing. And being able to see what you can produce, I think those have been some of the most rewarding moments, mostly because you get to kind of see the full crown creation cycle. Like, yes, you've probably built an app. Yes, you've probably run an app and it's probably gotten thousands of users. You probably passed a technical interview. You probably got a promotion at a job, but very few people on the planet can say, yeah, we've built a business that not only generated money, but helps customers actually succeed and grow in a pain point that for them was really pivotal to making them scale. And that's really exciting to me, especially with all these new technologies. Everybody's talking about automation and AI, but we find a small percentage of the customers in our industries actually, beyond kind of like the GBT and chat GBT, really understand what this means to incorporate in their business. They don't think of AI as a data engineering or data pipeline problem, when AI is all about data. So getting them to rethink how they look at the pipeline, how they look at the quality of data, so they can start using some of these models or creating their own models, I think has been really rewarding and it's been really fun.
I love that. How can people from the audience, or even me, support DataGovs? What can we do? You have any events coming up that we can attend? Do you have a repository that you want us to start? What can we do that will be able to give back to you?
For us, yeah, we have a community. We have in Maryland, we just launched our tech workers community around data. You can catch us at that. You can just, like, if you're in the Maryland area, type in Baltimore Tech Meetups. We're one of the largest meetups out there. We're sponsoring one of the largest meetups. You can definitely find us on GitHub. I think for us, it's just about, we just want to continue talking about the problems of compliance and leveraging automation for customers, and the problems around making sure that data quality fits and organizations think about trust and reliable data as it relates to compliance. So those are ways you can support us. We think we've never met an engineer, a developer, or any technical person that has not had a data quality problem at any level across any organizations. So we love starting those conversations because we think it leads to a bigger conversation of like, how do we get beyond just the tooling of this, better approaches to how we solve this or bring this to our organization. So that's one top of mind for us. And yeah, and just reaching out, leveraging the tool, giving feedback to the tool, giving feedback on this call. We love feedback and we love being able to see support in that, not just a repost, but like, hey, Greg, I think I know this packaging company. That those type of things really help us out. And we're getting a lot of demand right now, but I think those are the wins when the community can start talking more about good data as it relates to AI and compliance. Those are wins for us.
That's awesome, y'all. I wish I had my laptop because I usually try to find the links to things as the speaker speaking. But I would encourage the audience to rewatch this recording and figure out, like, just re-listen to the ways that Gregory just mentioned that you can support him. According to the live, we have 2 minutes left, even though we have reached the 3:00 mark. So I hope it's okay with you, Greg. I'm just going to ask a couple of just fun questions. They might not be the ones that are on the document because I don't have access to them, but I hopefully they're just like some fast questions. All right. So my first question to you is: do you pronounce the word? I don't want to say. Okay, the word GIF as GIF or GIF?
GIF.
Awesome. Okay, I say GIF. Oh, and so thank you so much to Kadesha backstage for sending these to me. All right, and then what's your most used emoji?
I think it's the fire emoji and the
Okay.
100 emoji.
That's lit. Okay. And then actually, I went on a stream the other day, and I actually wanted to ask this question because someone asked me this, and I was like, "Oh, it's such a good question." They asked like, "What is the new thing that you're trying to learn right now?" And I told him like I was learning like P5JS. It could be technical, it could be non-technical, it could be cooking or something like that. But just curious.
I think nowadays I'm cooking, trying to cook new cuisines. I'm Jamaican, so I love Caribbean cuisine. So I've been trying to do more Indian and Asian inspired stuff. So cooking, definitely.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I should have brought up Kadesha because Kadesha is Jamaican too. Awesome. I love to also I love to see people cook, especially non-women, just going ahead and trying to cook. It looks like thank you so much, Kadesha. If people are interested in checking out DataGov, Kadesha is now posting DataGov's Twitter and their actual website. So definitely go ahead and check that out. And I think for me, that's it. Is there any last words that you wanted to share with the audience on this stream that you didn't get to say?
Yeah, thank you, GitHub and startups and Roselle and team for having us here. Literally love talking about automated compliance and all the data problems happening. You can follow us at datagovs.com or DataGovs on any channel. You can learn more about us and join the community, contribute to the kind of conversations. You can also find us on GitHub and see a lot of the specifications we're working on. So yes, thank you all for this time. And hopefully next time, if we do a talk like this, we can talk about how much we've grown and how many customers we have and how we're deeper into our GitHub kind of like integrations.
Yes, thank you so much for reminding me of that. Yeah, I'll say a couple of thank yous too. First off, thank you to Gregory for hopping on this stream. Thank you for your time. And thanks for your patience. I'm so embarrassed at the technical difficulties. I kind of had in mind that maybe something bad would happen, but I really wanted to talk with you since I know you from college, and I wanted to learn more about the growth of your company as well. And yeah, thank you also to the audience for being patient. I know my audio and my video was not great right now, so I appreciate the patience and still being engaged. I always love that this audience is always here to ask questions and just interact with us and learn from us. And then also thank you so much to Kadesha and Alex for when I dropped off, they hopped in and did some stuff behind the scenes. And I will also just say, go ahead again. I want to encourage people to go ahead and click those links. And I hope that we can get back this future, so that you will be able to get a chance to get but that is it from everyone. Yeah. Oh, Greg, you just asked me, and I can say this out loud. The recording for this is available on YouTube. It's available on LinkedIn, and it's available on Twitter. Stay back behind stage after I say bye, just to like, or backstage after I say bye, just to like debrief and for me to show you how to get those links. But I'm hoping to edit it, especially that part where I randomly cut out, and I just want it to be pretty smooth. But if people are also interested in rewatching that, go ahead to YouTube. Like wherever you're watching it, you should be able to rewatch that recording. Um, that is all I have for you guys. Thank you, or for you all. Oh, actually, a comment just reminded me of a good question. Someone said, "Are these live every Wednesday?" That is a great question. So this is part of GitHub for startups, right? So if you are a startup organization and you're looking for some type of support, we do provide GitHub Enterprise for free for 12 months, 20 seats. So definitely reach out to your administrator, or if you are the co-founder, definitely sign up for that. And these streams do happen on Wednesdays, so this will happen next week, and it will be run or hosted by Alex, and he will have good internet, so you will not have to worry about that. All right, y'all, that is all I have for everyone. See you next week, Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. Thank you again, Gregory, for sticking around. Bye.